Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. Get higher, girl. Hey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Knights of the Pageless Library. I am Bo Knight,
And I am Ryan Knight.
and today we are taking a look at Roadside Picnic, written by. Oh man, do you know how to pronounce these names?
No, I was going to
Other
tell you
than
good luck.
Boris, I know their last name is Strugatsky.
Strugatsky.
Mhm.
So you got Boris Strugatsky and Arkady. Arkady.
Akade? I know that's way too Japanese. He's Russian.
Arcade. That's a tough one. And
Greg. I don't know.
Olena Bormashenko.
Yeah, which was the original translation is attributed to.
Right.
Narrated
And then
by Robert Foster or Forrester. My bad.
Forster. Robert Forster. I think
It's Forrester,
Forrester, even though there's no E in between the R and the S.
but I think that's still how it's pronounced.
Sounds good to me. And if we're wrong about any of that, somebody please email us kotpl.pod@gmail.com and let us know.
Yeah. So yeah, as always, this book we got it off of Audible. Please, I mean this book is very old, and if you listen to this and you are interested, you can pick up the translated version for free on the internet. It's you can read it if you want to, but we listened to it through Audible, and I think the version that we listened to was published in 2012. The book was originally written in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's not like a ton of info about these two authors, mostly because obviously what they write is normally in Russian. So they only have a couple books available on Audible that are translated into English. So they kind of
I'm
are.
pretty sure they are pretty prolific, like in that Eastern Bloc. Like they have a lot of books that are well known. It's just like not a lot of them have made it over here.
Oh, sure, yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit towards the end because I think some of this stuff has to do with the fact that obviously it's written in the country of Russia, which has there's a little bit of stipulations there. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Mr. Robert Forrester. What did you think about his performance in this?
I like it a lot.
Okay. I also am putting him in possibly my top 5 narrators.
Oh, good. I don't know why I thought you were gonna be like, and he sucks, and I was gonna be like, no.
No, I'm putting him in my top 5 narrators. I think.
I think he does an excellent job.
I think he, without getting too spoilery, he complements this book very well. I really think that with the way he sounds, the way he reads, his tonality and everything just fits the setting of this book to a T.
It does.
I honestly don't know if you could have gotten a better narrator to be on. I mean, obviously there might be, but to be honest, I think they nailed it with this guy. I really think he does an incredible job in this. And this guy's voice sounds like dumping gravel into a bucket, like into a freaking metal tin. Like he has that gravelly of a voice,
which is so fitting. So
exactly.
fitting. It's perfect.
It is.
So yeah, so this book it's a sci-fi fantasy book. I don't even, because that's even kind of reductive. I guess we'll get into it a little bit more. And it's only 7 hours, and how much, like 40 minutes of that is the authors kind of explaining what they had to go through to get the book published. And so that's not all like continuous story itself. The story itself is only about 6 hours long.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it right now on my phone. It's like the last 30 minutes is what explains that.
I was close for guessing.
You were close, but yeah, so about 30 minutes of that is mostly, the author explaining kind of what they went through to get the book published and translated and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and you could get this book for free. If you were signing up for Audible, this could be one of the books that you choose, or you could buy it for $24.50.
yeah, which is kind of expensive, actually.
It is, but at the same time, I get it.
I mean, I do too, but that's a pretty steep price tag for only a 7-hour book. I mean, realistically, 6.5 hours. That is kind of a steep price tag to me.
It is, but I'll get into why I think that's fitting.
Okay.
Here in a minute.
Fair enough. So what do you think? Easy to follow? Easy listening?
No.
No,
But
and
I think it is the strength of it, though.
Okay. Fair. I also am going to say this is not easy to listen to or easy to follow at all. If you
I was going to say it's easy to listen to. It's not necessarily easy to follow.
Correct. That's kind of what I meant. Yeah, it's not easy to follow. The story is rather confusing.
I don't know if I would say it's confusing. I just think there are. I want to know how much of that is like the translation things, but this book isn't going to like sit you down and be like, "Hey, that thing you just said, that's really important," and they're not going to mention it again.
Right.
That doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like I've already given away too much how I feel about this already. Okay.
It is easy to listen to, though. Like we've already said about Robert Forrester, he does an incredible job. So he really does keep you sucked into the story.
Yeah, dude, just listening to his voice makes me want to drink some vodka and smoke some cigarettes.
I'm by not so easy to follow, though. I mean, like if you miss a sentence or so, you're gonna need to go back and listen to it again. Otherwise, you will find yourself completely lost as to what's going on.
Okay, this is I know I've said this before in the past, but this is not a book I think that you can even get 50% of what's there if you listen to it once.
And I would say that's a fair thing to say.
And spoilers, I guess, but like I listened to this book 3 times, like back to back to back.
And that's impressive. I listened to it twice back to back. Mostly because I felt like I didn't get the full grasp of it the first time through. I felt like I missed some important stuff the first time through.
Well, this book kind of does the thing of like it puts you in someone's head, and he uses phrases that you don't like when he's using them for the first time. You don't really know what he means.
Sure.
And yeah, it can be a little confusing, and there are a lot of specific things that have specific names that are just kind of like thrown around casually before they explain what they are.
Right. Yeah, because they're basically dropping you into this world of this book, and they're not holding your hand. They're like,
no,
we're going to talk about all these things that are common knowledge to us, and you're just going to have to listen.
That's the perfect way to put it, is like they talk about these things like you already know about them.
Right. Which, to be honest, in some books, I hate. I hate when they do that sometimes. And we've talked about this before, that to me, a lot of sci-fi, especially sci-fi books, can really suffer from that, because they start talking about their freaking fandangle flubbergaster, and you're like, and then nobody ever explains it, and so you're literally left wondering the whole time. You're like, what is that? What is it? This book does a better job, though, about
this book doesn't even do that. It kind of shows you what the things do.
Sure.
It doesn't. I don't know. I'm already going to get into spoilery stuff.
At some point, though, in this book, what's better though is they might talk about a flabberty-floobergaster, but in passing, someone will explain what it is. You just have to catch that in passing explanation of it.
Right.
Because
Right. Or like some clarity of some names and stuff like that.
Right. And there are definitely a lot of sci-fi books that they drop in heavy into like the sci-fi nomenclature, like, oh, we're talking about lasers and force fields and anti-gravity and blah blah blah. And it's like, that's great, but you could ease us in a little bit, like, especially if you're going to be taking those well-known things and then changing them into like, painting your own world. You gotta kind of lube it up a little more than that. You can't just freaking dive us right in there and then expect us to know what's going on. This book does a good job, I think, of introducing these concepts to where you're like, okay, I'm completely lost. And then it goes back and it's like, this is what we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So recommendations?
Recommendations. I'll go first. I was on the fence about this the first time I listened to it. Then I listened to it again, and I was like, okay, I get it. This is a really cool book. So I'm not gonna highly recommend this one to just anybody though. I'm gonna highly recommend this to fans of science fiction and fans of like people who don't need like a high drama, every paragraph is action packed type of story, because this is not that.
No,
so
it isn't.
I mean, for people who are okay with that, for people who don't need like a thriller type novel, I'm going to say this one is like I said, if you're a fan of sci-fi, this is definitely worth a listen for sure.
I absolutely adore this book. I'm not going to lie to you. I couldn't get enough. Like I listened to it 3 times in a row because I didn't want to listen to anything else. Like I was obsessed with it, and I still kind of am. I'm working on like a 4th just listen for fun at this point, because I really love this style of book that just kind of sets up a lot of intrigue and a lot of mysteries that aren't necessarily gonna get answered because they don't really need to get answered.
Right.
Like there's a lot of like set dressing in this book that isn't necessarily important, but it's still really cool that it's all there.
Sure.
Because really this is just a story about a man doing the only thing that he knows. Is really what it's about.
Right. And it's very interesting too, because it almost is playing on like a repeat offender, somebody who like they get thrown in prison maybe because they committed like an armed robbery. They go to prison. Then they get out of prison for armed robbery, and they're like, well, I don't know how to do anything else other than armed robbery, so I'm going to do it again, like, because
right,
that's all they know.
Right. And I mean there's a lot more insidious stuff in this book than that. But as Ryan said, I don't think this book is for everybody. I don't think I can recommend this to a lot of people. But if you like sci-fi, if you like intrigue, and if you're okay with like a slower paced book that kind of like drip feeds the information to you,
mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of things for you to like here.
Sure. Definitely. But yeah, as I said the first time, I don't think I could safely recommend this to like everyone. I'm not going to say anyone and everyone should pick this one up. I think this is a pretty niche, kind of a niche market here. For sure, fans of sci-fi though, do yourself a favor and listen to this one.
Yeah, I could not recommend it more. Especially like if you liked like Solaris or Area X, I think you'd like this too.
Yeah, there you go. That's Solaris, especially, is the one I was.
Solaris for sure.
Yeah.
Which is also a Russian book. Strange.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, there you go. You got our recommendations. Now we're going to go ahead and pass the spoiler wall and talk about the story a bit. So if you find yourself intrigued and you want to listen to this, pause the podcast, go listen to the book, then come back and listen to our thoughts about it, and then please email us what you thought.
Yeah. Oh. So, what do you think about the very beginning, the first opening segment? Because really, this book is split up into like 5 sections if you count the introduction.
Right. So, and you're talking about like that very first
Yeah,
opening.
the interview with Dr. Pillman.
Yeah. So, and that's just kind of where they're talking about like his thoughts on the zones, right? Like what he thinks happened to.
Not even really. Like so the book opens with an interview with Dr. Pillman, and they kind of establish that I can't remember how long ago it was. It was like a couple years ago. There was this event happened, and they call it the Visit, and it created these zones where like basically the laws of physics don't really make sense anymore, and like very little is understood about them. But they think they know that we were visited by aliens, and it caused all these sorts of weird disturbances like in 6 separate places throughout the world. And this book is focused on one specific zone. They're in Harmont, which it's like a fictional town. It's not really said where it's at, but this book is about, so these zones are cordoned off, and this book is about these people known as stalkers who go into the zones and collect artifacts and bring them back out and sell them.
Right. We should also mention that the zones. So like this book doesn't take place like, oh, the visit happened yesterday. We're 13 years, right, after the visits took place. And the visits, when they happened, nobody can describe what actually caused it. Nobody necessarily saw or can explain the arrival or the departure of whatever caused this phenomenon.
Yeah, it's not really understood, but it was only for a couple moments as far as I understand it. Like they explain like kind of what happened to a couple other people. Like a bunch of people in these areas died immediately. Some of them they claim they heard thunder so loud it made them go blind.
Right.
Which when I heard that the first time I was like, oh, what?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Like, and so there's just like lots of weird stuff, and it's always referred to as the Visit. Like that's just kind of what people assume, is that aliens came to Earth for some unknown reason, and there's all these they like left a permanent mark on Earth in these areas, and these areas are full of, not necessarily full, but there are things in these zones that like defy everything that we've known about science.
Yeah, it's alien technology for sure. That's sort of what so at this point, like I said, so it's 13 years after the visit, which the zones are no longer like like you said, they're cordoned off, so they know the edge where the perimeters of the zones and stuff are.
Well, the zones actually have like a perimeter, like it looks different where the zone starts.
Right. So they've established all that. So we're, like I said, we're not talking about it's like the Wild West where there was a gold rush and everybody's going in and out of these places. This place is like strictly limited to government like scientific explorations of them at this point.
Well, and Pillman's even kind of annoyed that that's what they want to talk about when they're interviewing him. It's like the zones to a normal human, like the Visit didn't really have a big impact. Like the only people that are really affected by this are the people who lived in these areas at the time that it happened.
Yeah.
And still to this day who live next to them.
Yeah, who live like like Harmont is still an inhabited town, and that's where they have the like these big science depots set up to do research on the zone that's there in Harmont, and we're only going to pretty much focus on Harmont so anytime we say a zone, that's the one we're talking about because it doesn't jump around in the story.
We only get like mentions of other zones, but it almost doesn't even matter.
Right.
And so the first big section of the book, like where we kind of get to meet our main character, Redrick Schuhart, who everybody calls Red. Well, his friends call him Red.
Yeah.
And he's a really experienced young stalker, and like he's been going in and out of the zone for years. But he's when we first meet him, he's trying to clean up his act, and so he actually has a job at the Institute. And so basically he's like a stalker that gets paid now. Kind of. He doesn't really get to go in and out of the zone as much. He's a lab assistant to this guy named Kirill. I think that's how you say his name.
Yeah, Kirill.
Yeah, and I love the opening scene of Kirill is a scientist, and he is studying these things called empties, which are basically like two big, I guess I imagine them as copper, but they might not be, like two big discs that are always a set distance apart, and you can't force them together and you can't force them apart. Like no matter what you do, they're just are static in this, and they call them empties.
Right, because if you pick one up, the other one always stays parallel to it. It looks like if you had a can and just the top and bottom were there, and the rest is clear inside.
You're spoiling it already, though.
Well, that's why they call it an empty, though, because you can put your hand in the middle of it, and there's nothing there. There's nothing in between the discs.
Yeah, and so and Red really respects this Kirill guy, and you can tell right away, like Red's kind of a hothead, and he's like he's coming into work, and one of the guys calls him Red, and he's like, "You don't know me like that. You don't talk to me like that."
Yeah, and the guy's like, "Everybody calls you Red," and he says, "My friends
like,
call me Red."
My friends call me Red. Yeah. And I don't know. I like Red. I find him really, really endearing. Because he's just like a common man.
Yeah, and you get a lot of character building with Red right off the bat too, which I really appreciate.
And so, like, Kirill's kind of lost because they've been studying these empties for years, and they're not making any progress at all. Like nothing. They have discovered nothing at all.
Yeah,
and they're so. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and they're doing like any weird experiments humans could come up with to these things. They're trying to crush them. They're trying to blow them up. They're putting electricity to them. They're putting heat. They're putting cold. And they can't do anything to them. They're like nothing affects these things. Yeah.
And so Red, to try and cheer up Kirill, but also like he kind of has his own ulterior motives at the same time. He kind of like casually brings up the idea to him, like, why don't we go into the zone and get a full empty? I know where one is.
Right.
And so Red like kind of convinces him, and he's like, "Oh, it sounds like a great idea. Let's do it." And then so they're gonna go into the zone the next day, but Red gets accosted by the authorities because Red is known as a stalker. Like people in the town know him for that. And one of the things I actually really like about this book is like when it comes to the section, it tells you who it is, and what their occupation is.
Right.
Which is kind of important. But so in the beginning we hear like Red lab assistant. And so he goes to the Borscht, I think, right? And he gets accosted by, I can't even remember the guy's name. But he's like, "Yo, you like we know you're a stalker. Like you have to stay away from the zone at all costs." And so he's like, "Fuck, I can't go into the zone with Kirill." And he's like, "I don't want to let him go in there by himself. He'll end up killing himself." Because I mean, we'll come to find out that like literally moving 3 inches to the left in the zone will kill you. Like if you go the wrong way.
Right.
but he kind of he goes to work the next day and he's like, Keegrel, I can't go in. He's like, what do you mean? I have permits. This is all above board, because Keegrel knows about his past, but he doesn't really care.
Yeah.
But so he convinces Red, and then they kind of argue about who to bring, and Red's super particular because he knows how dangerous the zone is, and he has to he has to kind of be in complete command of everybody. Like if someone were to panic, it can lead to everybody's death.
Right.
And so yeah, they like suit up and they like get ready to go into the zone, and they have this cool truck, which is it floating?
Yeah, it
yeah,
floats.
that's kind
it's
of what
like
I took it into.
It's like a hovercraft thing almost, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and so they like, and like when you first go into the zone, he kind of explains that there's like a border where you can tell where the zone is. Like he even says, he's like, at least the aliens were nice enough to cordon it all off for us.
Right.
And so we go into the zone, and like immediately, like it's super eerie. It's so off-putting. Like it's so alien to even just be in this place.
So what I pictured while I was listening to this is like the shots you always see of like Chernobyl, where you can tell people lived there at one time, but now it's just abandoned. It's been abandoned for 13 years, this entire area of a city, basically. So,
Yeah.
and for some reason, whenever you see shots of Chernobyl, like the area seems to be just like a different color than everything else, even though it really isn't. But you get that sort of like everything's just like its own kind of gray color, like dull, bland color. Essentially, that's what I pictured while I was listening to this.
And it's weird too, because like there are things in the zone that have completely decayed, but then there are things in the zone that are completely pristine at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't even really so we get our first, like when they're driving along, because Red had already kind of partially mapped out how to get to this full empty, but he hadn't made it all the way there. And so there's like part of the journey that he's not quite sure about. And they come up on a bug trap, which is like, it's like an area of really high gravity, but basically the way I understand it is like if a human were to touch any part of it, it would just flatten you.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, so is it high gravity to the center of it, or is it high gravity to the ground? I never understood that part.
It's high gravity to an unknown point.
Oh, okay.
It's not necessarily the center.
Sure.
Like I don't even.
But like if you were to walk like into the edge of, we'll say it's a circle, if you were to walk to the edge of it, would it pull you to the ground, or would it pull you towards the middle of the circle?
I think it would pull you to the ground. I think it would suck you in, and it might pull you to the middle,
and then down.
But
almost like
there is something else too that comes up later that's not the same thing as a bug trap.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, which I love, Red kind of maps out the shape of this bug trap with bolts. He like throws them, and it's described as like they fly normal until they hit a point and then they drop straight down.
Okay, yeah, that never mind. You're right, and I should have thought about that. Yeah, because he says like he throws these little bolts. I'm picturing like little 5/16 or 1/4-inch bolts, and yeah, they hit the edge of that, and then it pulls them down, and then they hit the ground almost as if they're like a large stone. That's the sound they make, because their weight is multiplied so many times.
So he like maps out how it is, and they go around it, and then they come up to a point, and like this is kind of where his experience comes into play. He just gets a really weird feeling, and he's like, he thinks that they should go right, but he just gets this weird feeling, and he's like, no, we can't go that way. We have to go the other way.
Well, and like from the very beginning, you find out as soon as they get in the zone that Red, because he's so experienced, he can almost sense the bug traps, whereas other people
Yeah.
can't. That's how he knew in the beginning. He's like, there's a bug trap up ahead. That's when he starts throwing the bolts to map out the shape of it. He knows it's there, he just can't sense the shape. So we get this idea how experienced he is right within this first little like 45 minutes to an hour of the story, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I almost get the sense that Red has like an unnatural ability to sense these things in the zone.
Okay, sure. That kind of makes sense.
And I mean, we'll get more into it later, but like you'll learn that like a lot of the reason they know so much about the zone is because people died.
Yeah, and Red, that's realistically why Red knows so much about the zone himself.
Yeah, it's because he's watched a lot of people die.
Right. I also like too how they're wearing like the fancy suits from the research institute, and Red's like, these are useless. He's like, they don't save you, they don't help you sense things. He said these are pointless. I don't even understand why they wear them.
Yeah, and Red kind of has a thing with like alcohol too. Like he like drinks in the zone, and it's kind of like a known stalker thing that they kind of like take nips from the flask while they're in the zone.
Yeah. Mostly to kind of calm his nerves, I think.
I think it is like a calming nerves thing. Yeah, like kind of maybe to steel your resolve.
Sure.
So they make it up to the warehouse where Red knows this full empty is. And Red kind of like scopes out the place, but he sees this like strange like shimmering light. Like it almost looks like spider webs, kind of.
That's what I pictured when he talks about it, yeah.
Like I almost get the vibe that it's like, yeah. But like but Red's like, oh man, like I don't really know what that is. I'm not too sure about it. And
so, not to interrupt you, but almost like what I picture is like spider webs, but almost like tinsel that you would hang on like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Because he says he catches reflections of it and then it goes away and then he catches reflections again, like almost like it's like tinsel. You know, sometimes you might not be able to see tinsel and then it moves and it catches the light just right and so it looks silver. That's kind of what I pictured.
So Red and Keygrill go into the warehouse, and Red is so used to working by himself that he doesn't warn Keygrill about the like fuzz or like spider webs that he's seeing. And when they go to pick it up, Keygrill like brushes his back like ever so slightly against this.
Right.
And Red's kind of thinking about it. And one of the things I love about this part is that they like load the empty up in the buggy or whatever it's called. I can't remember what it's called. But it drives them back in the same exact way that they came in.
Right, which I thought was cool. So that also is kind of your first indication that like this is also not taking place like in the 70s. This is also a type of future. You know, things are different in this world than they are like right now.
Yeah.
Technology is a little bit more advanced.
Yeah. And so they make it back and everybody's like cheering them on and Red's like, what, like shut up. I've done this so many times. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
He's like annoyed.
Red's very like cynical because people get, you know, they're all excited for him, but at the same time Red is always like talking to himself like they just don't know what it's like. They've never been in the zone. They don't know what it's like to be in the zone. Like
And when they're like undressing, Red like makes it. He like looks at Keygrill's back, and he just wants to make sure that there's like nothing wrong.
And there's not, right? Visually,
it looks completely normal.
Right.
And so yeah, Red gets cleaned up, and he takes a shower, and then he runs into that same guy that had accosted him the night before, and was like, "What were you doing in the zone?" He was like, "What? It was all above board. I went in." Like with permits through the institute, it's all good.
Yeah, he's like, I'm completely legit now.
Yeah, I'm completely legit. And we find out that Kegrel had died of a heart attack and in the shower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Red goes to the Borscht, right? Right after that. So he's there and he's already getting sloshed, right? After when he went to the zone, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, so he's already pretty drunk, and that's when we find out that Kirill died. So then Red starts drinking hard because he thinks it's his fault now. Because he says he should have told Kirill about the stuff he saw, or he should have told him, convinced him not to go to the zone and all this stuff.
Yeah, and he's pretty beat up about it because Kegrel was like one of his only friends.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the cops show up, right? While Red is just smashed drunk.
Yeah, and so Red uses something called a shrieker, which isn't like truly explained, but I get the vibes that it's like a flashbang and like some sort of noisemaker on steroids.
So and the shrieker is something that they get from the zone, right? Okay, yeah. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure like Redrick picked that up when they were in there.
While they were in, right. Yeah, that's the vibe I got. The second time I listened to it. First time I was like, all this stuff was completely over my head.
Yeah, for sure. And so he like tosses the shrieker in the bar, and so he like distracts everybody and he's able to get away.
Right.
And then we get this kind of like heartbreaking scene with Red and his girlfriend Gouda, and she's pregnant, but she's thinking about getting an abortion because stalkers are known to have strange children. And like they're known to like have like high mutations in their children. Right. Even though the zone has no radiation.
No detectable radiation, yeah.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to get an abortion though, right? Her mom wants her to get an aburbtion.
Yeah, basically like her mom wants her to leave him.
Yeah, she wants to keep the baby. So, and Gouda, she even tells Red, she's like, I'm keeping it no matter what. Even if you leave, I'll keep it myself.
Yeah, and I'll raise it my damn self.
Yeah, she's very insistent that she's gonna keep it.
Yeah, they decide to get married. And so then we come to section 2, which is it's like I think Red is 25 or is he 28? It's quite a few years down the line.
He's 28. It's 5 years later.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we come to like a couple years down the line, and it even says like Red, no known occupation.
Yeah, the titles of each sort of part are very descriptive. It says Redrick Schuhart, 28 years old, married, no known occupation.
Yeah. And so Red has decided to go back to stalking, and we open with him and this other man, and something is very clearly wrong with this other guy. He's like screaming his head off, and they're like kind of laid low, waiting to see if they can escape. And we meet this other guy, and his name is Burbridge the Vulture, and he's another stalker. And something has happened to his legs.
Yeah, and Burbridge he's like an older stalker, right? He's an older, both an experienced stalker and an older guy in general, right?
Yeah, he is. Okay. And so what happened to Burbridge is he accidentally stepped into something known as hell slime, and it's dissolving his leg bones.
Right. Yeah.
Which is brutal.
Yeah, so he can't walk, obviously, under his own power, and he also has Red feel his legs. So Red like grabs around the knee, and it just basically feels like mush. Like his leg feels like
disgusting, dude.
Mush inside. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and so the Vulture, like Red is thinking about just leaving the Vulture. I mean, that's kind of like what you do when somebody is injured in the zone. You just kind of, even getting injured is kind of rare because most of the things just kill you.
Yeah, I was gonna say you rarely get injured in the zone. You usually either survive or you die. There's not much middle ground.
and the Vulture is able to convince Red because he's like, I'll give you the maps, I'll tell you just how to get there, I'll give you everything that you need in order to get and they don't really talk about what it is yet. But he's like, I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm the only one that's seen it. I'm the only one that knows how to get there. I can tell you how to get there, but if you leave me here, it'll be lost forever.
Right.
And Red, kind of against his better judgment, takes the Vulture out of the zone, and they're able to sneak out, and they have to immediately take the Vulture to this guy named the Butcher. I can't remember his real name, but he is a doctor that specializes in human conditions from the zone, like things that happen to people from things out of the zone.
Yeah, so obviously the stalkers know him, but it's a very like Red takes Burbridge to the Butcher directly to his house. Like there ain't no clinic. They go right to his house, and basically Red drops him off, and he's like, yeah, he got into the hell slime. It's his legs. So, and the Butcher's just like, all right, okay, sounds good.
Well, the Butcher knows what that means.
Yeah, and the Butcher, though, he's like this old man, but he's very like, okay, I got him. I can handle it.
Yeah. So from there, Redrick goes home, right? Yeah, he like hides the swag in his car in this like really elaborate way. He has like this fake gas tank, and he like hides the stuff in there, puts some garbage on it, and then like puts some fish on top of it to make it look like legit, like they were really fishing.
Yeah, fish that Burbridge had bought from out of town like that day. Basically, that was going to be their alibi, is that they had just gone fishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is kind of where we start hearing about Redrick's daughter, who he calls the monkey.
Yeah, because he goes home, right? And he tells Gouda, he's like, I got some fish. You're going to need to cook it up.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, I got to cook it up. And they kind of have like a little discussion about what happened to the Vulture.
Right.
Yeah, but then so then we actually get to meet the monkey, who she is like she's a little girl. She seems totally smart. She just wants to talk to Redrick, but she's like completely covered in hair, and her eyes are entirely black.
Yeah, so she kind of looks like a monkey. So that's what they call it.
Yeah. I mean, not now, but later they like talk about her hands are like paws.
Yeah, and then the fact that obviously her entire body, all the way up her cheeks and her legs, all the way up, they're covered in this short hair, short blonde hair.
Yeah. So then Redrick goes and he meets with these guys to sell them the artifacts that he's found.
Right. So this is the bread and butter of what stalkers do. So he gets home, he takes all his swag in, he dumps it all out, and he counts all the things that he got out of the zone.
Yeah, and he writes up a how much it's going to cost them.
Right.
But he even at this point has stuff that nobody else has ever seen.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Most of it he knows what it is. Other stuff he's kind of like setting off to the side. He's like, even I don't know what this stuff is. So and then he goes to the hotel, and he's going to go talk to the guys to sell the artifacts that he brought out.
But he doesn't actually have what they specifically sent him in there for, which is hell slime. Well, he has it, but he doesn't want to sell it to them.
Right.
Because that's how Burbridge got hurt, was them trying to collect this hell slime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reddick's like, I don't have it. You guys don't. I don't have it. You guys aren't gonna have it, because Reddick doesn't actually want to give it to them, because he's worried that the hell slime doesn't have any good uses other than to hurt other people.
Right. And they're kind of hinting that they are going to try to sell it to the military, which obviously is not good for anybody.
Yeah. Because the hell slime is bad news.
And don't these guys kind of they give it away by talking about other countries researching the same stuff, right? Like
Right.
talking about they've heard the other countries are doing that, so they want to be the ones where they are to give their military that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so Red, as always, he goes to the Borscht and gets absolutely tanked after getting paid.
Well, so I just want to back you up for a second, because one of these things that he didn't know what it was, I'm picturing sort of like a bracelet-sized ring, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's two guys he's talking to in the hotel. I can't remember their names right off the top of my head.
It doesn't
But
really matter.
So he gives them this ring, and he basically is like, I don't know what this is. And they're like, we don't know what it is. And the one guy puts it on. I can't, it must be smaller. It must be more like a ring that would go on your finger, because the guy puts it on his finger and it starts spinning around his finger, and it won't stop. He can't, he gave it a spin, like he tapped it to spin it, and now it will not stop. It's spinning on his finger. So the guy's freaking out, and the other guy's like, oh, that must be worth a lot of money.
Which I'm pretty sure, like, right now is when he gives them the lobster eyes and the floating napkins.
Really?
So those black things that he's like, that are like long and kind of thin, that he like squeezes and they light up.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure those are the lobster eyes, and that ring thing I think is the floating napkin.
Oh, okay. That would make sense.
Because when like, you know, later I was like, what are they talking about? I've never heard of these things either. But I'm pretty sure Red just gave them these things.
Right.
So, what was it? Okay, so he goes to the bar and he gets absolutely trashed. And while he's there, he gets caught by the guys that know that he was like in the zone.
So they're there when he shows up, though, because the bartender of the Borscht is also who hooks them up to sell the swag usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when he gets there, he notices that there are like 3 guys who he doesn't recognize. And one of them is like pretending to clean the floor. The other one is standing at like the end of the bar, and the other one is standing by the door. And when Red comes in, the one guy basically moves to block the door behind him.
Yeah.
And so Red immediately is like, kind of what's going on? And he talks to the bartender, and the bartender's acting super weird. And then Red is obviously smarter than that. He puts 2 and 2 together. He's like, okay, these guys are here to arrest me.
Yeah. And there's like a trap door in the Borscht, and he like escapes.
Yeah, I like that. He's used it so many times too to get used to it that he can run through it even in the pitch black dark. Yeah, I like that.
So he gets arrested for a couple minutes, but he ends up escaping. And he gets out and he calls Gouda and he's like, "Hey, I've been found out. I'm going to go to jail. Don't worry. You will have enough money. Like, I promise you, you will never have to worry about money." Yeah. And then he calls his clients back and he tells them about some hell slime that he has hidden.
Yeah, because he's taken it out before out of the zone. Mm-hmm. So,
but he didn't want to sell it because he felt like nobody really should have that.
Yeah, but he calls those same clients and he's like, "Look, I hid some slime. It's here." He says there's some other stuff in there too. You take that stuff. He said, "But you have to promise me that Gouda will be taken care of."
Yeah.
You know, any amount of money. He says anything she needs, you better be there to give it to her while I'm locked up. Because he says he's going to turn himself in.
Yeah. So yeah, and then Red gives himself up to the police, and that's like the end of section 2.
Right.
And this starts section 3, which is personally my favorite. And so we open with Richard Noonan, which is what is he? He's like a supply contractor for the Institute, right?
So I'll read you the title of it. So it's Richard H. Noonan, 51 years old, a representative of electronic equipment suppliers to the Harmont branch of the League. Well, sorry, my thing's gonna start playing. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like license.
Huh.
So yeah, he's an electronic equipment supplier to the Harmon Institute.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't even really know how to start with this part. So it like opens with Noonan. And he's like kind of like patting himself on the back. He's like, "Man, I'm so good at my job. I'm the best." And then he gets a call, and it's like, "Hey, we need to talk to you about blah 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 account." And he's like, "Ooh, they're gonna praise me some more. I bet. I can't wait." And he goes there, and it's like immediately clear that that's not what's happening at all.
Right.
And it's kind of revealed that Noonan is actually he's like a covert operative, and he's trying to stop people going into the zone is what he's doing. And this guy is actually a really good friend of Red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it behooves Noonan because he's a contractor. So if stuff is being taken illegally from the zone, that doesn't do him any good, basically.
Right. And we do get a little scene too. I think it's kind of important to mention that the Institute has like these robots that they use that go into the zone, but they're kind of like bumbling and stupid and just like pick up random stuff.
Right. Also, I'm just guessing they don't really talk about this, but I'm guessing they would lose robots a lot to like bug traps and stuff because obviously they're not going to know they're there.
Right. And so Noonan had submitted a report recently that he thinks that he had completely shut down all the illegal selling of things out of the zone. Like he thinks he's basically stopped all the stalkers that are going in and out of the zone.
Yeah, he tells this guy like the name of all active stalkers in and out of that zone that he knows or has ever known of. So they only talk about stalkers that clearly know what they're doing. They go in, they get swag, they come back out. He said because there's a lot of upstarts who just go in and get themselves killed.
Yeah.
And he said obviously I don't know who those people are.
Right. And all of these known stalkers all have a name, like the Maltese and stuff like that. Like if you're well known, you kind of have a nickname.
Yeah. Yeah, the Vulture and stuff like that.
And but basically this guy's like, actually, you're dumb because there's more stuff coming out than ever before. And he like lists all the stalkers and he's like, their fingerprints are on it. You have no idea what's going on. You are not controlling this at all. You are basically a failure. Why are we even paying you? What are you doing?
Yeah, and the biggest one that they cite is Burbridge.
Yeah,
and
which is the Vulture.
Noonan. Yeah, and Noonan's like, that's impossible. He doesn't even have any legs. How can he be selling so much swag? But they're like, look, Burbridge is running these like weekend retreats for people, and Noonan's like, yeah, I know
come
that.
Up yet.
That isn't that in the first conversation he has with these guys?
That guy doesn't bring it up, but he brings it up when he goes and talks to like his stalker that's running his freaking brothel.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. His like bodyguard dude. That's right.
who they call Kitty.
Yeah. And he's like this
which is
huge
supposedly
dude.
Mongolian for king.
Right.
Kitty Hamfists.
Yeah, that's right. Kitty Hamfist.
Which Noonan like shows up and he just starts kicking the shit out of Hamfist.
So yeah, because Hamfist is a stalker, right?
Right.
But he's also basically the way this part read to me is that Noonan is playing both sides of the coin.
He is.
He's in with the stalkers and he's in with the government as well. He's turning stalkers in while also collecting money off of swag. So he's doing both because this guy specifically says, because Noonan's kicking the shit out of him and he's like, where's all the swag? How does Burbridge have all the swag? And the guy's like, I don't know. And that's when Noonan's like, where's my swag? Why don't we have any swag?
And I get the vibe that Kitty's just not in the loop.
No, he sounds kind of dumb.
I think he is dumb.
He's basically the muscle. Like he sounds like the hired muscle.
But I get the vibe that the other stalkers don't trust him.
Right. Yeah, they've
And-
probably already found him out. Basically, they know what
And-
he's doing.
And so, like what you were talking about, like he brings up that Burbridge has these weekend picnics for tourists,
That's right.
and they go somewhere and they leave, and they refer to it as Sunday school.
Right.
And so
now-
Burbridge is like setting up these stalkers to go into the zone. Like, yeah, but Kitty knows nothing about it.
Yeah, and Kitty failed to tell Noonan about this because he just assumed that that's what it was a weekend picnic. And
Yeah.
Noonan's like, well, obviously that's when they're collecting the swag, is when you lose track of him. That's when they're
Yeah.
getting the swag.
Yeah, and then so this kind of leads to the next part of the book, which is probably my favorite part, when Noonan meets with Dr. Valentine, which is Pillman from the beginning.
Right.
And they kind of talk about like where is all this going? Like how do these zones end? Like what does this mean for humanity?
I like
And-
this part too because Pillman's like, I don't drink. Rosalie, get me a cognac.
Yeah. Cognac, a large shot this time.
Yeah. I just love how he's like, I don't drink, but realistically what he's saying is like, I don't drink cheap beer or vodka. Like
And
Anyways.
they like go and they like break down all the items that have been found, and like basically the only super useful thing so far is these spacels, which is like an unlimited battery that they can get to asexually reproduce,
right.
which is kind of cool.
This is also where the title of the book comes from, is this conversation.
So yeah, they talk about like what was the point of the visit, and like Valentine brings up a couple of things. He's like, I don't know, maybe they left technology here for us so that we could understand it, and then once we understand it, we'll be able to contact them.
Right.
But he's like, that's not really what I believe happened. It's like, what I believe happened was, like, have you ever been on a roadside picnic? And he's like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, you have a picnic, there's like beer cans strewn everywhere, there's just garbage all over the place, there's a monkey wrench that somebody dropped out of their pocket, there's children's toys, there's oil rags, there's an oil filter, there's just garbage everywhere.
Yeah, because apparently in Russia, when they have picnics, they change their car's oil when they do that, and they just.
Russia's a different country, man.
I mean, I'm not saying that's what they do, but just the way they wrote it in the book is this guy's basically saying, like, if you went on a picnic and you changed the oil in your car, you just dump the oil on the ground, you throw the filter in the bushes, you might change the spark plugs while you're there, you throw your dirty rags on the ground.
Yeah, and so it kind of sets up this. So, and I mean, it's never explicitly explained like this is exactly what happened, but to me, the aliens just showed up, had a picnic, made a mess of the place, and left.
Yeah. And basically what we as humans are seeing is the things that to them, probably mean nothing. And they just discarded them and left them behind.
And these things are so alien that their mere presence here permanently changed the environment.
Right. Which I really like the picnic thing because, yeah, he's talking about, like, if you drain the oil out of your car out in the middle of the woods, that is now leaving an obvious oil spot, and it's probably going to, kill the grass, kill any animals that get into it, anything like that. And he's basically saying that, to him, that's what it looks like they did here.
And something which had been mentioned before, but we kind of forgot to mention it, is that people that have been dead for years inside of the zones are getting up and coming home.
Yeah,
They come back to life. Not with like any nefarious thing, but almost just like a puppet on puppet strings, just going about their old routines.
Right. Yep. I can't believe I forgot that.
because it's
deal.
Not really that important.
But they don't. It is a big deal, like, to us. But when you read it, basically, because at this point the zones have been there for almost 20 years.
Yeah,
so they're like,
it's
not
thing.
new. Yeah, it's they're like, it's not that big of a deal.
Well, and they also mention that anybody that had been in the zone during the time of the visit that wasn't killed, if they were to move to somewhere else, that place would be hit by like natural disasters and like horrible things would continuously happen to them
Right.
if they leave the zone. And it's crazy to me. Like it doesn't really, I mean, it's like that has so much of an effect on you. Like and it can be directly tracked, and it can be directly like correlated to how many people immigrated to that specific place.
Yeah, and it's like bizarre stuff too. And the example they use is like, so Valentine tells Noonan, he's like, you live in Harmont, but you weren't born here. So he said you could leave and you could live a happy life, you'd be fine. He said, but now imagine you lived here after the visit, and or you lived here during the visit, basically, and you were born here. He said, now you decide you want to go be a barber in Toronto. And you'd go there, and 200 of your clients, after they visit you and they get a haircut, they die in some sort of weird, tragic accident.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, these are the kinds of things we're tracking from the zone that happen around the zone.
Yeah, and they mentioned too the weird physiological changes that happen to stalkers that just have spent too long in the zone. And we
their
kind
children.
no, not even just that though, but even the people themselves, because Redrick brings it up in that section too, when he's like, I have that weird feeling like I was in the zone, but I wasn't.
Right.
Like, so even going into the zone changes you.
I also like that a lot of this really messes with Noonan's head, because Noonan's like, you mean the aliens didn't even notice us when they showed up?
Yeah.
And Pillman's like, probably not. The way they interacted with our world, they might not have noticed us at all.
Yeah, like they're so alien. And that's one of the things I really like about this book, which is an interesting take on like alien life, is like, why would it be anything like us at all?
Yeah. And I've had that I've sort of come to that kind of conclusion too, that like we just assume that like, oh, aliens are going to look like the Greys or whatever. And it's like, well, number one, why would they be humanoid shaped at all? Nothing's
Right.
saying they have to be humanoid shaped. And then I love how Pillman says, how do we know what intelligent is?
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, I love this part where he's like, we just assume we're intelligent because we're not like other animals. But he said, how do we know we don't look like animals to aliens or another type of intelligence?
Yeah. Yeah, and anything able to make contact would be intelligent.
Right.
Yeah, but maybe like that intelligence isn't something that we would necessarily understand.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so this I think this conversation, it's not quite the highlight, but it is very interesting, because this is where you're going to learn a lot about the zone.
Yeah, this is like the key part in the book where you learn like why the zone is there, what goes on kind of in the zone, that they don't know still anything about the zone even 20 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super, super interesting. But from here, he goes and visits Redrick
He
at his
goes
house.
Yeah, because Redrick is recently released from jail. Like very recently, right?
Yeah, like
Within a
only
day?
a couple days ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this part is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It is so heartbreaking. And so yeah, he visits him, and he's like, we get another scene with the monkey, but she's definitely not human anymore at all. Like, she can't even talk.
Yeah, she can't talk anymore. And it's also weird to Burbridge, right? Because he's like, I swear I just saw her not that long ago and she was like a little kid. And he says now it looks like she's grown a lot in like a week or whatever the time frame was.
Yeah. And also here at frickin' Red's house is his father, who had been dead for a long time and had just wandered home one day.
Okay, see, so I missed that point both times I listened to it, but now it makes complete sense.
What do you mean?
I didn't realize that his father was one of those like deceased got
Oh,
up.
really?
No, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me the both times I listened to it because I was like I just assumed his dad was like a just super duper old man, you know, and he's just there and Red's taking care of him. But now that you say that, I'm like, okay, I do remember now. Yeah, Red says something about they basically kind of have, it's almost like in passing that they talk about it, that he died and he came back.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's like this super heartbreaking scene of like the monkey. She like puts her head on his dead dad, and it's like they have a weird connection almost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, yeah, it's super troubling. And Noonan is kind of like seeing all this, and he's like feeling really bad for Red, but then he's like, but this guy's a son of a bitch, and he had to have been lying to me about all this shit, because where is all this stuff from the zone coming from?
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like this part is, it's so sad. Like I feel for Redrick, because he's just a man doing the only thing that he knows and the only thing that he's good at. But interacting with the zone has had so many adverse effects on his life, but it doesn't stop him.
Well, and like, okay, so at this part too, right? They explained that when, okay, now it makes way more sense to me. I must have been not listening very well when this happens. So now I get it. They explained that the authorities came to get his dad too, right? When he came back home, and then Red, he beats the shit out of like 8 of them.
yeah, and they're like flung out the door.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So he basically defends his dad, and that's why his dad is there.
Yeah.
But also at this part,
go ahead.
I just was gonna say this part's also extremely messed up because I mean you're talking Red's been out of prison for like a day, and Burbridge is already at his house trying to convince him to go back into the zone.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I get the feeling that like literally I know what he's trying to get him to do. We're gonna talk about that in a minute.
Right.
But like Red is the only one, because like everybody else is just not as good in the zone as he is.
Yeah, I don't know. This part was very like I was like mixed on it, like I said the first time, because at first I kind of completely missed the point of it, but then now, yeah, the second time I get it.
Yeah, I mean, we get that scene too of like basically the whole time that Noonan is there, Redrick's dad is trying to drink this glass of vodka that he was given. And at one point it's like somebody is controlling his puppet strings, and he just throws the glass back in like a totally alien like marionette way.
Right.
Yeah, and it's troubling. It's very, very troubling. So yeah, like the zone is just completely inhuman. Like it's just it is so alien that it is like we're never gonna understand it.
Right.
And they do talk about too in this section that like anything that we've taken from the zone, we have not been able to recreate on our own. Like we cannot make our own of anything that's come out of the zone.
Right.
Like we can't make a copy of it at all, and even come close. Like we can use some of the things, but we don't understand why they work the way that they do.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very interesting.
Super interesting. And so we go to section 4, which is the final section, which is it's from Redrick's point of view again, and he is in the zone with Arthur Burbridge.
Yeah, which is the Vulture's son.
One of his sons.
One of them, yeah.
Because Burbridge has tons of kids, and none of them are mutated.
Right. and actually we forgot to mention earlier on when Red talks to Burbridge's daughter, who's like supposedly, voluptuous and incredibly hot, and it's weird to Redrick that none of his kids have any mutations at all.
Well, and none of his kids look like him.
Also true, yeah. And he talks about how Arthur is also like a very handsome, good-looking dude, and Red just can't understand, because the Vulture's kind of a son of a bitch, and Red's one kid is mutated. His father came back from the dead and came back to his house and all this weird stuff, and yet the Vulture, who is a douchebag, doesn't have any of the same problems.
Well, and this section is kind of heavy on this, and I think this is probably a good time to talk about it. That the Vulture, like the way that he was able to get through the zone so much is by sacrificing other people to know where the bad things are.
Right.
Like he's a real piece of shit, and he kind of has led so many people to their death to get to what Redrick is trying to get to this time, which is something called the Golden Sphere, which is something we've heard about a lot in the book. It's mentioned a lot. A lot of people think it doesn't even exist. And supposedly this is an artifact that grants wishes.
Yeah.
And so this is what Burbridge was talking about when Red pulled him out, was that he wants Red to get the Golden Circle, and he had given him the map to get there because Burbridge had seen it, but he wasn't able to get there, and we'll figure out why here in a minute.
Right.
And so yeah, Arthur is with him, and Red is so bitter at this point, and he like almost doesn't even understand why he would go into the zone.
Yeah, and a lot of this is mostly Red sort of talking to himself and just being bitter about the whole thing.
Which I totally get it. And
yeah,
okay.
Because
I want to talk about this.
Like, to me, this part, Red is so bitter because he's there with Arthur, and Red walks in the back. Usually whoever's leading in this area walks in the back, and he's telling Arthur exactly where to go to keep him alive. But they're also passing like body after body after body, and Red's like, that's so-and-so, and that's so-and-so, and that's so-and-so, and all these guys came in here with the Vulture. Like,
yeah,
he's so pissed because he's passing all these dead guys whose either their clothes are there or their body is still there, and he knows the Vulture came in here with all of those guys.
Yeah, and so yeah, like I already said, like the Vulture had been sacrificing people trying to get to this Golden Sphere.
Right. Even though too, a lot of it, like, he's like, there's so-and-so, he got stuck in a bug trap. There's so-and-so, he's in the slime. There's so-and-so. Like, a lot of this stuff is things that Red finds very pedestrian. Like, how are you going to get killed by a bug trap at this point? But the Vulture was just letting these dudes walk into that stuff to learn where it's at.
I get the vibes that the Vulture wasn't a very good stalker.
That's what I get too, yeah. And that's also, Red's kind of mad at himself for even pulling him out.
Well, and we did skip over this. So Red when he gave the money to the Vulture's daughter, she scolds him and she's like, "You had the opportunity to let that son of a bitch die, and you didn't."
Yep. Yeah, she basically says you should have left him there.
Yeah.
And then Red smacks the shit out of her.
Yeah, Red smacks a lot of people in this book.
Yeah, Red don't care, man.
I think Red is such a well-written character.
For sure.
Like, because he is someone that has the true ability in the zone, unlike Burbridge, but he's loyal.
Yeah, almost to a fault.
Almost to a fault.
Yeah, because to him, the Vulture got himself into that. He stepped in the slime. He did it to himself. So Red's like, why should I stick my neck out for this guy who he knows had been taking people in there and getting them killed?
Yeah, and I mean, we do get a couple scenes with Arthur, and like Arthur's like this young kid, and Ryan already mentioned he's like super handsome, and they go through like a lot of crazy stuff in the zone. Like this is where we really get to see like just how violent the zone can be and unpredictable the zone can be.
Yeah, like the freaking weird like all of a sudden it starts to get hot, and Red, he's like, get down. He yells at Arthur to get down, and they get down, and then Arthur, it starts getting super hot to the point where Red feels like it's burning his skin and his back, but Arthur gets up like he's gonna run, and Red grabs him and he's like, get down, it'll kill you, get down. And he forces this kid into the ground, and even though Red feels like he's on fire, like that's what he describes it as, he's on fire, he's like, I'm burning. And
go ahead.
But the zone is so weird that he knows it'll pass. He knows it won't last forever. And then it finishes, and they get up, and Arthur's face is like blackened. It's like covered in ash, and Red's like, man, there goes his handsome face. But then they get cleaned up, right? And Red's like, oh no, he looks fine. Like nothing happened to him.
Well, and this is where he starts calling Arthur the talking key. Right.
That's right.
Which is so brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I don't think they get cleaned up because Arthur's like, "Can I just get cleaned up, sir, please?" And Red literally doesn't even respond and just points.
Well, he does mention that he cleans his face off, and that's when Red is like, oh, his face looks fine. Even though Red assumed he was like barbecued to nothing, his face looks fine.
Yeah, and Red realizes like that whatever that heat wave thing actually didn't hurt them.
Yeah, even though he said he felt like it was literally melting his skin.
And I quote, "It burned my ass to the bone."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they go through this like nasty, stinky swamp, and there's like a freak lightning storm that's like right above their heads.
Yeah,
and it like starts arcing down and like just cracking rocks and stuff. It's crazy.
Right. And that's what, this part is cool because it's like a full stalk into the zone. It's when they actually go into the zone and they're there for an extended period of time versus like in the beginning where they had like the hovercraft thing, take them in, take them out, no big deal.
Yeah. And so they get to where they know where the golden circle is. And this part is so brutal. And so Arthur sees the golden circle and he runs towards it, and he just starts screaming at the top of his lungs. He's like, happiness for everyone, free, and may no one be left behind. Like happiness for everyone. Yeah. And then seemingly out of nowhere, he seems to get grabbed by something, and it wrings him out like a towel.
Yeah, picks him up into the air. And that's exactly how it's described, as if you were wringing out a dishcloth to get the water out of it.
Yeah. And so this is what Red knew was coming, that there was something called a grinder in front of the golden sphere, and there was no way to get to it without sacrificing another person in order to disable it for long enough for Red to go through there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why he was calling him the talking key. It's so brutal. And originally, like the whole time, like Red is kind of thinking about what he's going to wish for when he gets to the golden sphere, and he wants to wish for the monkey to be human. But when he kind of gets to the circle, he's like, I don't know what I want. And then he like starts screaming at God, and he's like, don't you know me better than anyone? I like, you know what I would wish for, just wish for that for me.
Yeah. He also basically too, then he says the same things Arthur wanted. He says happiness for everybody, free, and may no one be left behind.
Yeah, and that's where the book ends.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that's where it goes into the after part, kind of where he talks about having it getting it translated and actually getting this book published and stuff like that.
Yeah, which was a nightmare.
Dude, one part too about the end of this that's so messed up, and again, it didn't really click with me until the second time, is that Redrick knows that the Vulture sent his son knowing exactly what needed to happen.
Yeah.
And that's another reason Red is just like, I should just let that son of a bitch die. He's like, the Vulture is the worst of all of us, and he's also the one basically living the high life off of everybody else.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, and he kind of mentions that they're like, these people are really prolific throughout his life. The people that have kind of built their life off the corpses of others.
Yeah. Well, and like Red, the reason he goes through with this though is because the Vulture promises him $500,000, right?
Yeah.
He says that's what the golden ring is worth, the golden sphere. So that's when Red's like, I might give the Vulture 30 of that or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole time he knows that Burbridge knew exactly what had to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so brutal.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Oof.
But overall, though, yeah, super interesting and good story. Especially because what I liked about this book is that it's a sci-fi book with very little sci-fi things. Like, that's kind of what makes it cool, actually.
Yeah, and I don't know. I appreciate that, like, especially the story is mostly told from just like a normal guy's point of view.
Yeah.
And it's not like somebody who knows more about it than somebody who's just interacting with it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I don't know. I love it. I love how dark it is. It's so dark and like bleak and heartbreaking. And it's kind of funny at some parts too. Like some of the stuff Redrick has to say is pretty hilarious.
Oh, Red is a great character.
Yeah,
I think he's actually my favorite part of the book is that how good of a character Red is.
Yeah, he is. It's good.
It's a pretty solid book. Like I said, I had my doubts the first time, but I think that's because I missed so many key points the first time I listened to it.
Yeah, the first time I was like gripped, just like listening to it, staring at the ceiling.
So, yeah, I mean that is. You got any wrap up stuff though on Roadside Picnic?
No, but other than like this game is what, like, if you've ever played the Stalker games.
Oh yeah. Good point.
It all almost came from this book. Pretty much all of it, except for the zone isn't as hostile. There isn't just like wandering mutants.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean though. In the book, it's just so much more tame. Like I said, it's not like they go to the zone, and they even mentioned that in the beginning, that's what people assumed. You know, people were even already spreading rumors about that early on, that there's mutants there, and they're snatching people up and they're eating them. And they're like, no, none of that has happened. Like, we can't prove any of that has happened.
Yeah.
So it's not your typical sci-fi, like aliens in your face and alien technology being used. And like I said, your freaking schmurgle-durgle and your zippity doodads. There's none of that stuff, which is kind of what makes this book so unique, in my opinion.
Yeah. Like there are sci-fi elements, but they're mostly like benign or like don't have a use.
Right. Like I said, it's very subtle stuff. It's not in your face sci-fi, which I actually kind of appreciated.
Yeah, me too.
Because I'll compare it to, you've listened to Hard Luck Hank, right?
Oh yeah. What? Why are you bringing that frickin' dumpster fire up?
Because that is my counterpart to this book. That is a all sci-fi, all the time, in your face sci-fi type of book, and I don't like that very often. Like, it's a book like that is almost sci-fi for sci-fi's sake. You know what I mean? Like, they're using that as the crux of their story, whereas this one, sci-fi is almost like an afterthought of the whole story.
Well, this is a very human story.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a good way to put it. Yeah. It's a human story that just happens to have sci-fi elements that interact with it.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you could tell this story in the same way, in just being like, oh, we dug up this. You know what I mean? Like humans naturally stumbled across something
Right.
instead
This
of like a
could
big
be
event happening from outside sources.
sure. Yeah. But that's also what makes this so cool and so compelling.
No, I 100% agree with you. I love this book. This is such an interesting take on alien life to me.
Sure. I agree. I thought
Like,
that was a very cool take.
Yeah, like they're so alien that they didn't even notice us when they were here.
Yeah. I do love that exchange where they talk about like, oh, why did the visit happen? And they're like, we have no idea. There's tons of theories, which is what we do as humans, as we come up with theories as to why.
Yeah,
But,
and Noonan is like mad at all the theories that basically are like, it had nothing to do with us.
right. Yeah.
And Noonan's like, I don't want to believe that.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to feel that insignificant.
Which is so true in just like science as it is today.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, this book is just refreshing to me.
There's also a movie, right? That was called Stalker.
Mm-hmm.
Might have to check that one out.
It's so if anything comparing to the Solaris movie, like Russian like movies are so slow, so slow.
Right. Sure.
Which this book is slow too.
It kind of is, but at the same time, I think it's well paced.
It is well paced. Almost every time I've listened to it, I'm like, whoa, it's almost over already.
I kind of did that too the second time. I was like, oh, I'm almost at the end. Like, but it is well paced. Like, it's not. They don't do very bad about like hitting you with a hard hook and then dragging you on until you hit a climax. They do a good job of like they hit you with a good hook, but then they don't pull back so far that it gets boring.
Yeah. And I've been waiting to talk about this for like a month and a half.
I know.
I feel like I probably did most of the talking this episode.
Hey, it's all good, man. It is a good book, and I'm glad that you found it and that we decided to talk about it because yeah, it's a solid listen, and I do feel like it's kind of a hidden gem for sure.
Yeah, I mean, people who know about Stalker know about it, but that's really it.
Right, and I would say that anybody who's played the Stalker games, you know, because I downloaded all of them and I've only started to play. I've played a little bit of the first one, but definitely if you've played that game, do yourself a favor and listen to this book to understand where that content comes from.
For sure. Yeah, I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you've played those games and you haven't checked the book out.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So what are we doing next time?
I think we're going to try and do some September originals.
Well, September original.
Which is, if somebody knows something I don't, please explain this to me. I couldn't actually find a dedicated, like, these are your available originals for this month, like been in the past.
I think they changed the structure to be more like Netflix.
Yeah, and so what I've also noticed with with Audible while I was going through it this time is that if you have an Audible membership, you also now, sort of like with Netflix, have all these included stories that you can just download at any time you want, which to me is how it always should have been.
Yeah, it really makes no sense the other way.
Yeah, because the way the structure normally is that you pay a monthly subscription and then you get one free book a month, and then you would pay for all the rest if you wanted more than one a month. Whereas now there are a bunch of books available to you as well as others that you can pay for should you choose to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll see how things go. I did pick 2 that I found, so we'll see if we can finish them both.
I thought we were doing Dracula.
Oh, did you not get my text after that?
I guess not.
Oh, well,
I've been listening to Dracula.
Oh, great. I've been listening to this Dragon Squisher from Scott McCormick.
Oh, that's right.
Did you just have a dirt moment there for a second?
I don't think so.
'Cause I'm pretty sure I texted you right afterwards and said I found them. Let's do these two.
Hang on, where's my phone?
Anyways, this is a conversation we can have off of the air. So either way, hopefully next we're gonna do some sort of Audible original to give people maybe something along those lines to listen to. So, but if the structure of Audible has changed to where there's no longer like a set section of originals that you can choose from for free, then we might have to just restructure this part of the podcast anyways, because it won't make quite as much sense as what it used to.
Which I feel like I already know what we'll just do.
Yeah, so if anybody has any suggestions, again, please feel free to email us, kotpl.pod@gmail.com, and, let us know what you guys think.
Yeah, please. Anything else? Anything else we need to mention?
I think I'm good.
Okay, so yeah, hope to catch you guys in the next one and stay out of the zone.